Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Breakthrough Performance Podcast. This is me, your host, Coach Evan. And today, I want to talk about what makes a good exercise, right? Originally, I was thinking, what should I talk about today? Well, I've got a lot of questions recently on the training floor about glute training specifically. And to me, it seemed like it was a little short sighted to just make a video about that because the principles that will apply to that are going to apply to all of our exercises, right? So, whether that's bigger arms, shoulders, toned legs, bigger glutes, all of these are going to apply. All right. So, before we get into that, I just want to congratulate everybody on completing their first week of our 6 week transformation challenge. Um, it's not easy, but we're getting it done. And I know you guys can do it. And I'm in there with you. All right. Let's keep it going. All right. 1 week down, 5 weeks to go. Let's do it. So, when we talk about a good exercise, right, what do we mean by that? Do we mean, oh, this makes me sweat? Is this cool? That's definitely a factor. No, what we're talking about is, are we able to produce the stimulus we want from an exercise to get the adaptations that we want, right? So I'll give you an example. When I do a bicep curl, and my goal is to develop strength or to develop size in the biceps, I'm able to do that very, very well because it is specifically fatiguing the bicep musculature. And that over time is going to tell my body, hey, we got to beef up the biceps a little bit. We got to get a little stronger here. We got to get a little more muscle on there, right? So we could see how that's good. Now, to give you a bad example of that, um, if I were to do a squat with the goal of developing my biceps, that's obviously not going to really do much, okay? Now, these are obvious and you guys understand them. But one thing you do see in the gym a lot is people making exercises harder just for the sake of making them harder. Now, again, if your goal is to just have hard workouts, go for it. You could do whatever you want. But one of the more classical examples I see of this is something like a squat on a Bosu ball, right? Or a common one is a bench press with a specific barbell called an earthquake bar that I'm not a huge fan of, but some people are, where we're introducing great amounts of instability. Now, this is going to make the exercise much more challenging for you, but if our goal is to build the legs, it's not going to do too much, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is and kind of how to get around that and maybe some things we could do to make exercises more specific for the adaptations we're looking for, right? One principle that we talk about a lot with training, I don't talk too much about on the floor because it's more of like a when I write up the programs type of thing or when I'm talking to other coaches about variations and modifications we're going to make, is the SAID principle, the SAID principle. It stands for specific adaptations to impose demand. And again, that's what I was talking about before, right? We are looking for specific adaptations to impose demand from the body to um, get what we're looking for. Okay, so let's break down a little bit of, again, what do I mean by a good exercise? Number one, very important thing here, very, very important thing here, is are you able to do it without pain or at a reasonable level of pain, right? We don't want to be in pain in the gym, but sometimes you got an achy shoulder. It's really hard to get around it, okay? So are we able to get low levels of pain or none, preferably none, obviously? That is going to be the first one. If it hurts, don't do it. There's always another option for you, right? And if we've found all the options and we found something that doesn't hurt too much, it's probably a good idea to do that. But sometimes it's good to just stay off the muscle completely, right? If you just broke your shoulder, we're not doing shoulder presses. I don't care, all right? Um, After that, right, making sure that it's pain free, I would say, are you able to do it well, right? When you do an exercise and the whole time you're thinking, am I doing this right? I don't know. It doesn't feel comfortable. And you're thinking more about your form or your technique than actually building the muscles, you're not able to produce as much effort on actually performing the movement uh, with the muscles, right? So if I'm doing a bench press and the whole time I'm feeling very wobbly, I can't really do it, it might not be the right option for you, okay? One example of a pressing movement that requires a high degree of skill is going to be our push-up, right? And I say high degree of skill just because it's a movement that we're going to actually do that, again, you need to have a specific amount of actual coordination to do it well with your body, right? Now, does this mean we don't do push-ups? No. It just means we do push-ups in a way that we're developing the skill, and then we're going to find another way to train the pecs, the triceps, the shoulders, right? So that's why sometimes in our workouts you'll see a push-up followed by a bench press, followed by a dumbbell press, okay? Because we're developing skill there. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for skill in the push-up, but we still got to hit the muscles another way, because if you're just learning how to do a push-up, it's not actually going to be that good for developing those tissues, right? So again, 1, is it pain-free? 2, are you actually able to perform it in a manner that you're producing force with the target tissues? Okay. 3, and this is a really important one. This is probably the one that I see overlooked the most. How much stability do you have, right? By stability, what I mean is, well, here's a great example for you. Am I trying to do a bench press standing up straight? Now that's a funny example, but you already understand kind of what I'm talking about there, right? You don't have anything actually supporting your body to push, so all of your brain power, all of your nervous system power is going to be devoted to actually holding yourself up and balancing, right? And again, that doesn't mean that you can't do a crazy exercise to build stability. It just means that you're probably not going to get a ton of stability from an exercise like that and get a ton of hypertrophy stimulus. Hypertrophy is a word I used a few times on here before, just referring to growing the muscles, right? Are you able to put yourself in a position where you're stable enough to actually push with the tissues we're looking for? Okay, so those are kind of the big 3 with that. There is a 4th one, and I would say it's, do you actually enjoy doing it, right? In my sessions, and I know in our other coaches' sessions, there's a really, really big emphasis on making sure you guys actually enjoy the training. And that's because when you're enjoying your training, or enjoying is a strong word. You guys might listen to this and laugh and say, I don't enjoy any of it. I hate working out with you. But you know what? You hate it enough to where you're working hard, but you're coming back, right? It's not that bad, right? I could go off on this for a while, but I know you guys love working out with me, even though you joke and you give me some crap every once in a while. So yeah, if you do a bench press, I'm sorry I keep coming back to the bench press, but when I think of working out, I think of bench press a lot. If you're doing a bench press and you're like, wow, I hate this movement, I really do not want to do it, you probably don't have to, right? You probably can sub that out for a dumbbell bench press, because at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all exercise approach. I mean, biomechanically speaking, bench press is going to be great for just about everyone. But exercise, program design, these things aren't just biomechanics, okay? When I push my arm forward on a bench press, I'm using my pec muscles. Does that mean it's a great exercise for me? It does for me. Might not mean it's great. Might not mean it's a great exercise for you. And that's totally okay, because we have tons and tons of options. And you guys know, if you've complained to me about a specific exercise, a lot of the time I'll just say, well, do you want to do something different? And that's totally fair, right? So let's recap those 4 a little bit. 1, is it pain-free? 2, are you able to do it with a high enough degree of skill to actually get something out of the movement? 3, are you stable enough to where you can focus more on using the muscles than balancing and keeping your body in the right position? And then 4, do you enjoy it enough to actually do it and progress it over time? Okay, progress it over time also ties in with stability, because a lot of the time you can't progress exercises that are unstable, and if we can't progressively overload the tissue, right, we're not going to be able to get much out of it. So let's go back to the bench press again. Bench press is an exercise that we can scale with weights almost infinitely, right? You can load up a bench press as heavy as the barbell can hold. And I don't know many people, I don't really know anyone, who benches more than a barbell can hold, okay? To give you an example of something that's not too great for that, would probably be something like a handstand push-up. Now, you can go really, really far with a handstand push-up, but at some point you hit a wall where you can't progress it anymore. And that's a huge problem, right? Now, at that point, you would probably just switch off to something else. But again, that's an example of that progressibility being super, super important there. Okay. So let's go through an example for each muscle group of why I actually think it's a great idea to do. And then we'll tie it back into the glute training, which was my original idea for this episode. All right. So let's go through biceps. How to get bigger biceps. Well, I need to think, what do my biceps actually do? My biceps control elbow flexion, right? That's going to be bringing my wrist to my shoulder, bending the elbow. Okay, so now I need to think of a way to load that movement. Wow, you can hold a dumbbell. That one's easy. Awesome. Um, a poor way to do that would be something like a cheat curl, right? Something where you're swinging your body a lot. Um, and the reason why I wouldn't recommend doing something like that is because, well, one, let's go through. One, can you do it pain free? Yeah, you can. Cool. Two, can you do it with a high degree of skill? Well, you don't require too much skill to do that, so I guess you probably can. Right? So far, so good. But where does it all fall apart? Three, stability. Stability is where this one starts to fall apart, right? You are not in a stable enough position to actually progressively overload the bicep tissues over time, right? It becomes more about our ability to twist the body and rotate than it does for the biceps. Now, if you wanted to get a little more rotation and a little more twisting muscles, I wouldn't say this is a great exercise for that either. And that's because you're not really able to progress it that way either. Right? So cheat curls, not something I would really recommend. There are specific cases in which I would recommend getting a cheat curl in, but that would be kind of like a burnout type of thing at the end of a really hard set of strict curls, right? One thing we talk about a lot is like, well, should I get 12 reps in or should I get 10 reps in and go a little heavier? Well, the answer really is that you should try to get the 12 reps in with a heavier weight, assuming that's what's prescribed. This is just the example I had this morning. So you want to be pushing things hard, right? That is, again, that's how we tell the body, beef up this muscle group or get stronger in this muscle group. And sometimes we're looking to just get a little extra volume in with a weight that we aren't 100% sure is manageable. But that doesn't mean you give up on the set. Sometimes that means that you accept a little bit of a decrease in form. And that's totally okay because when we do a cheat curl, again, when I went through that, we got those first two down. You're still targeting the biceps, just not very efficiently, right? So it's totally normal and fair for efficiency to drop as the as fatigue sets in, right? As your strength decreases throughout a set. So that would be a case in which I think that it's kind of okay to do a cheat curl, right? You're shooting for a set of 12. I'm at 10. I don't know if I can do any more. Do I stop doing curls altogether or do I get a couple cheat reps in? You get a couple cheat reps in, right? It's okay. It shouldn't be the norm, but again, if we're pushing things really, really, really hard, it's okay to accept a little bit of a decrease in form. So again, totally fine. Just shouldn't be plan A, but it's a good plan B. All right. Let's move on to a shoulder press. Now, when we talk about a shoulder press or shoulder training in general, this one is a little more complicated than the bicep because very rarely do people have pain doing a bicep curl, although it certainly happens. I've dealt with some tennis elbow in the past, and yeah, you get a lot of pain doing bicep curls that way. So you adjust. But enough ranting about my elbow pain. Let's talk about shoulders, right? So when we talk about what the shoulders do, you want to be thinking about shoulder flexion, right? That's going to be raising your elbow overhead. And I say raising your elbow overhead, not pulling your elbow down, although it's going to be the same movement, just different directions. Now, what's a great way to do that? Again, I can just hold a dumbbell, right? That's awesome. I every day I think, wow, it's great that we could just hold weights and do the same movements. There's so many different styles of training out there where you don't really take advantage of that. And I'm always like, why? Why? Um, so when we do a shoulder press, how do I make sure that I'm pain free? Well, we see if there's pain. And if I have a shoulder press and there's pain, then we try something else, right? Like a lot of the times I'll have somebody do a front raise instead. Now, we're doing that because it's going to be the same muscle groups worked, but pain is always going to be the first thing that we're thinking of. If you've trained with me, you've probably heard me say, let's check off the box of no pain before we actually progress the weights. And, for all the reasons I'm talking about previously, if it hurts, you can't really progress it, and you're probably going to make the pain worse. So find something else to do. Totally okay. All right. But let's assume that you can do a shoulder press. How do I make sure that I'm stable while I do that? Well, first thing is I probably want to have a bench behind me to lean back and support my spine, support my hips, right? So that way I could focus on just the shoulder moving. 2, what can I do to make it more stable besides just supporting my body weight? Well, I want to make sure that my joints are stacked in the right position. Now, I talk a lot about having your wrist over your elbow in pressing movements. Now, that's not a hard rule all the time, but generally when you're pressing or when you're pulling and we're looking to target the shoulder, chest, or back muscles, you want your elbow to be in line with your wrist. Now, that's because you're going to minimize the need for balancing there, and you're also going to minimize the need for the other supporting muscles to work, right? If I do a shoulder press with my elbow bent the whole time, well, obviously I'm going to have to use a lot of triceps and a lot of my back musculature to keep myself stable. So we want to make sure that, one, I'm supporting my body however I can, manipulating my environment is what we would say. Manipulating the environment, again, the example would be a bench behind me. That's going to make this a great one. 2 is thinking a little bit more about the form, that my joints are stacked in a good way for me to actually press. Okay? If you're checking off all those boxes and you're doing a shoulder press, awesome. We're gonna get big shoulders. Okay. Now, when I talk about biceps, when I talk about shoulders, training back and triceps are really going to be the same thing there. But the need for stability is not as great because you can kind of just sit down, right? Gravity's not affecting you the same way for like a cable pull down. Um, and then for the triceps, it's just going to be elbow extension. So that same thing, you're just going the opposite way. You're not bringing your wrist to your face. You're actually pushing your wrist away. Um, so that's going to be how we make sure those are good. Let's move on a little bit to our ab training. Ab training is a huge, huge one where I see people have absolutely no stability. Absolutely no stability. That's a good one right there. Write that down. We'll get t-shirts made, posters put up. I'm just kidding. Now, when I see people do ab training, right, a lot of the times you'll see something like somebody standing up and moving a plate around, right? There are many ways to move a plate around. I understand. I understand. But we want to think again about that, our little checklist of whether or not this is a good exercise. So, do we have stability? You need that. Absolutely do, right? So, something like lying on the ground while you do a leg raise, okay? That is going to be an example of stability. If you do that standing up and you're just raising one leg, now that might certainly be a good exercise for like developing balance or something like that, but you're not really able to progress it because again, there's not so much stability. Okay, so if you find yourself doing that exercise where you're standing and raising a leg, it's not necessarily bad, and it might be what you need, but generally speaking, for most people, you're going to have your best ab exercises while you're lying on your back. Again, generally speaking, because again, you have a high degree of stability there. The skill requirement is kind of low, and if need be, you can just put weights on your legs, right? Or weights in the arms. There's a million different ways to approach ab training. I'm just giving you guys examples. Okay. When we start to introduce instability to that, we are training more balance and our actual competency to control our body, which again, not saying those are bad things. I'm just saying they're not going to get you jacked, and I know you guys want to get jacked and shredded. So this is kind of where we're focused on right now. So let's move on to leg training, right? That's the big one. That's the big topic today. Not really. It's kind of a general exercise thing, but it's what I'm getting the most questions about these days. Glute training. This is the one you've all been waiting for. How do we do glute training? I'll give you an example of how we don't do glute training. We don't do glute training by going on our hands and knees and kicking one leg behind us. Is that going to use your glutes? Yes, it is. Is it going to be stable? It can be. It can be. Is it going to be stable when we increase the weight? Absolutely not, right? If you were to attach an ankle weight, which is very common, you're really only able to get like 15, 20 pounds before you're just thinking about your balance and actual ability to do the movement. So that's an example of how I would not approach glute training. So again, while you're moving through that hip extension and getting glutes, are we able to progress this over time to challenge the glutes more? No, we are not. So that's why I would not recommend that. Now, if you're just starting off, that might be a fine place to start. But I would absolutely prefer you do something like an RDL, right? That's going to be where you're standing, bending the hips, and standing up while you're holding onto weights. Because we got all of those things, right? We have stability because we're standing on the ground. We're holding two dumbbells. The dumbbells aren't going to move. The skill requirement is not that high, although it might not be the easiest movement to get down at first. It's generally an exercise that does not hurt to do, but again, if it does, we find something else, and we're able to progress it. Right? I've done that exercise up to like 500 pounds. Right? You can load that one up. All right. Now, another example would be something like a hip thrust. Right? Why do I love the hip thrust? Because you have a ton of stability on your back, skill requirements low. You see where I'm going with this. You might get the theme by now of what I look for in exercises. Pain-free, high stability, you can progress the load. Okay? That's why I love a hip thrust. All right? Now, there is definitely something to be said for training different portions of that range, right? You get more hip extension on a hip thrust than you do on an RDL, but I don't think you can load it the same way. So, like, there's a little bit of a spectrum there with what we're looking for, right? You do want to be training muscles throughout the full range. So, again, hip thrust, you're going to get that. When we talk about quadricep training, now I can sit here and extend my leg and bend it all day. I can go running and I can get a lot of quads. But what are we looking to do? If we're looking to tone or build the front of our thighs, it needs to be in a challenging range for your actual muscular system, right? So I wouldn't say to run for building the quads. I think we all understand why, because you're building cardio and muscular endurance, which isn't going to be the same thing as building that actual muscle, right? So for quads, perfect example is going to be our goblet squat. Now, goblet squat is one where we get to one of those boxes that I haven't spoken about with the others, where you're like, I'm just bored of this exercise. Can I do something else? Yeah, absolutely, right? Goblet squat is one that people commonly say gets a little boring, and I think that's just because at some point when you load it, you can't really hold too much more weight in your hands. Goblet squat, if you guys don't know, is where you're holding a kettlebell right in front of your chest as you squat up and down. Now, I love that exercise for all of the reasons that I have previously discussed. I'm not going to talk your ear off about stability, ability to load, and pain-free exercise all day, but I think it's a great place to start because you do get a lot of those things. It's just at some point, a lot of people need to move on. So we typically will move on by going on to a Zercher squat, where you're holding a barbell in your elbows, right? High degree of stability, low pain. We're getting a lot of legs there, and we're going through that knee bend and extend, okay? When we talk about hamstrings, it's going to be very similar to glutes. The glutes and hamstrings work together a lot, but not all the time, right? So something like an RDL is going to be a lot of hamstrings, a lot of glutes. A straight-legged deadlift is going to be a little bit more of hamstrings, okay? And that is because the hamstring muscles connect lower on the body, lower on the leg. So when you straighten your leg out, you are going to get more of a stretch and contraction through the hamstrings, right? You're still getting glutes on a stiff leg deadlift, but we bias it a little more towards the hamstrings with that, okay? Another great exercise for building the hamstrings is going to be something like our hamstring slider, right? If you guys have done that one, you're a lot of you guys are cramping up right away when you do it, which is actually a great sign that the muscle's working. So that's how we get that a little bit in there. Okay, so I hope you guys found this useful. As I said in the last one, like if I didn't understand these things, I would have a very, very hard time in the gym. So I'm very glad that I do, and I want you guys to understand this stuff. All right. Again, if you're on our 6WT, let's keep pushing it. We're always here to help if you got any questions. And yeah, let me know if you got any suggestions for the podcast. Would love to hear some. I don't want to just talk about the things I'm thinking about all day. I want to talk about what you guys want to hear. All right. Thank you so much. Coach Evan, out.